beginning, I didn't know how to get speeches. I mean, the thing that a lot of people think is, I've got great content and I'm a great speaker, but my speaking business sucks. And like everything, it's not about the quality of the product or the service, because if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter. That was probably the first rude awakening I had, is we're in a speaking business, but first and foremost, we're in a selling business. And I would argue selling ideas, which is why I love books. Books get people excited about ideas. And if we're doing things right, we can then, get people to say, I want this.
Yeah.
But I'll also say that I've evolved my thinking a lot over the years, because originally I thought my purpose in life, my goal is to do an hour speech. And what I realized is that's great. That's fun. The audience loves it. They clap, they go home, and then they forget. What I realized is that I need to start focusing not what happens when I'm on the stage, but what happens after I leave the stage. And I really started to focus very heavily on, what do we do to keep the conversation alive after I'm done? And so I don't call myself a speaker anymore, but I am actually an innovation expert who helps organizations be able to adapt to the current realities. And I happen to give speeches, I write books, I do advisory work, and I have all these other programs that I do. And I think that's been, very powerful for me, because that mindset shift away from being a speaker to being a problem solver. And if I can't figure out what problem my clients have, then I'm not even a good speaker. Now, maybe it's a morale problem and I could be an entertainer. It's not my thing. But maybe I'm going to be somebody who identifies the pain that a client has, and I can design a speech around solving that specific pain. And then we have a conversation. Great. Now that everybody understands the process at a high level, how do we keep the conversation going? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. It's a bit of an existential questioning, like what value am I really providing? And I know that in an hour you can make a life-changing impact on someone. I do know that. But when you're dealing with large organizations, sometimes you need something more to keep it going. And so when I have conversations with clients and they hire me for a speech, one of the first things we'll talk about before we get too far down the path of designing the speech is to say, at some point, I want to talk about what happens after I leave the stage. So instead of when I walk off the stage, that being the end, I want it to be the start. But what's it the start of? What are we going to do to get the impact? And again, that one conversation changes the mindset of the client to start thinking about, okay, well, how do I define value? I'll tell you a funny story. So when I left Accenture and I went out on my own to become a speaker, one thing which I just never gave any thought to was, how do you price a speech? Nobody in my world had any clue. And so instead of me saying, this is my fee, I decided I was going to try an experiment. And this experiment was very interesting. And I said, we're going to do something called PW3, which was pay what we're worth. And typically what a speaker will do is to say, this is my fee, and after we're done, I'll send you a check, I'll send you an invoice, you send me a check. The PW3 model was basically, I have a conversation with the client before the event, and what we're going to talk about is value. Now, when I'm done, you pay me what you thought I was worth. Any amount doesn't matter. But the most important part of the process was to have a conversation around how you define value. And what I discovered is that most organizations, it's like a page out of an Oscar Wilde quote, who said, a cynic knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And what I realized is most speakers are paid whatever the last speaker was paid, or they're paid whatever they have allocated for a budget. They're not paid based on the actual impact they're going to make to the organization. And so I've always been thinking about, what is the impact? What is the value? What am I creating that's going to make a big difference for the organization?
So what happened with that experiment when you started doing that? What were some of the results?
So the results were fascinating. Most people, again, could not articulate the value or the impact.
Okay.
I mean, they might be able to say, well, we want you to get at least a 4.9 out of 5 on the ratings. I was like, okay, that's not value, but okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And so it was really difficult for anybody to be able to articulate the transformation that would take place in their organization.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is in almost every case, they said, and in the back of my mind, I had a number. And they would say, look, this is too difficult. Just tell me your fee and we'll pay your fee. And that's what ended up happening most of the time. It was an experiment. I didn't do it very long, but I was really curious, how do people define value? And it was just fascinating that value is defined in different ways by different people.
From time to time, I've also had the opportunity to work with people who are not just the organizers, but perhaps the people who might feel the impact of that event, the people who might actually get to enjoy what happens after the fact if it's done really well. And those conversations are definitely a little bit different. It was actually through conversations like that that I even discovered an idea for a follow-up opportunity, because I planted a seed with a few ideas and I only had an hour or 90 minutes to do that. Not a lot of time, to your point, to really make a massive change or drive a transformation. So how do I keep the momentum going is what I often ask myself is, what can I do? And maybe it's as simple as offering, hey, let's do a 60-minute Q&A, right? It's been a week or a couple of weeks. Let's make sure that we check in with people, because I promise you, not everyone in that room is going to be interested in the idea or even looking for change. But there are always people in that room looking for change. And I bet those are the ones who are going to sign up and show up for a Q&A.
Absolutely. And I like what you're saying, because you don't need everybody in an audience to get what you're talking about. One of the things that I have is a program called my Fast Innovation Mastery Program. And basically what we do is, inside of organizations, we create a cohort of masters. These are the people who are passionate and excited about innovation and want to bring it to the rest of the organization. So if you're doing a speech, you don't need hundreds or thousands of people in the audience to be excited, but you need that core group. And if you can get that core group up and running, passionate, then they become the people who share it with the rest of the organization. And we create a second cohort called the ambassadors. We work with them. The masters now teach the ambassadors the process. And now all of a sudden we start getting some momentum and people start taking notice. And that's exactly what we did with Accenture. Is we went from 0 people to 20,000 people using this model in just 9 months, because we had a small core group that engaged a larger group that engaged the 20,000 people. We can scale quickly, but we can start with the smallest, most passionate group of people to make it happen.